So what's the fastest way to get away from sounding like you're playing scales when you're playing scales? Well, the first part is already on point, meaning the first part is already right. We know that whenever we want to play lead guitar, generally an easy way to get started playing the right notes is to learn some type of a pattern. And the pattern tells us where the right notes are. It allows our fingers to hit the right notes, right? Without having to think about the names of the notes. But that's where most people get stuck because they continue to focus on the actual pattern itself, and they play the pattern and they kind of expect some kind of magic to happen where maybe if I play the scale a million times, well, then some magical music is just going to happen. And that's just not true. That's only phase one, or it's only first gear. There are a lot more gears in a car, right? But most people get stuck in first gear. They don't really realize that you can actually shift gears. So when you learn a pattern, like say a scale pattern, that's just gear number one. After you learn the pattern, you can play the right notes. Well, now you need to shift gears. So what does shifting gears look like? And how do you add those different, what I'll call musical layers? So the first thing is rhythm. If I'm just going to play, let's say, three notes. If I'm just going to play a scale pattern that looks like this, it just looks like that. And let's say those are the notes of the scale pattern. Well, no matter if I practice this 5,000 times, it's not going to sound any different. Maybe the notes might sound more clear if I'm practicing more, if I'm trying to sound more clear, but we need to shift gears. We need to add some new layers to what we're playing in order to sound like music. The first thing that we need to do is listen. Okay, it sounds weird, but at first, when you're learning a scale pattern, your attention really isn't available to actually listen to the sound of what you're playing, at least not to a large extent. You're really focused, your mind is focused on, okay, am I hitting the right notes? Are my fingers going in the right place? Can I play the pattern? That's really what you're focused on, right? So the key is, after you've practiced that, and after it's not really that much of a challenge anymore, it doesn't matter if it's still a little bit of a challenge, that's a good thing. You don't want to stay, what I call staying on the vine too long, like a piece of fruit. You don't want to leave it on the vine too long until it rots. That's when that's when you play the same thing too much, that's when it gets old and boring and you just kind of start to feel disgusted with your progress because you just play the same old stuff all the time, and that stinks. So you want to first, like I said, learn where the notes are in the pattern, but that's just gear number one. After you feel reasonably comfortable, it doesn't have to be perfect. After you feel reasonably comfortable with where the notes are, then what you want to do is start shifting your attention to your ear. What am I hearing? I'm asking myself as I'm playing, what am I hearing when I play this? So if I practice this little scale pattern, that's the pattern, and I practice it so much to where I don't really have to think too much about what my fingers are doing. Now I'm going to start to listen to what I'm playing, and here it is. Well, if I'm listening, it just kind of sounds like somebody playing a scale, right? So that's not what I want. So the next thing is, again, you first want to start to listen to what you're doing. And as you become aware, you have the aural awareness of whatever it is that you're playing. Now you can start to focus on, it's kind of like an artist who's going to paint a picture. But once you're aware of the different colors that you have on your palette, meaning, let's say in this case, like the different scale notes that you have, well, now you can focus on, okay, how can I combine these colors on a canvas to actually create a landscape? And that's what we're talking about, creating music. Like, how can I create a musical landscape? Okay, so after I start listening to the notes, I start listening to how these different notes make me feel. And in this case, without the, with absence of background music, I'm not going to get too much feeling out of this. I'm not sure if I can actually play, here we go, all these notes. There you go. You can kind of hear the feelings of those notes. So it gives me a feeling because there's some contrast or there's some juxtaposition between the notes, which actually produces an emotion or produces a feeling. Now, after I'm listening to the notes, the next thing I might want to consider adding is rhythm. And rhythm is essentially like the backbone of any music. It's what gets people bobbing their head. It's what gets you tapping your foot if you go to a concert or a restaurant, or you see people, somebody just playing at your house at a party or whatever, right? That's what we call getting into the music. So instead of just playing it straight ahead, what we call straight ahead, like this, just a boring scale, I'm first going to listen to it. I'm going to recognize, hey, that just sounds like a boring scale. Okay, now let me add some rhythm to it. So what if I go, well, now it's a little more interesting. Even if it's not the most amazing thing in the world, What if I do? Now it starts to become a little bit musical. What if I do this? Now it's even more musical. What if I switch the order of the notes? So that's the second thing that I can do. Let's say we focus on the rhythm. Let's say that's gear number 3. And now we can start to play around with when do we play the notes. So, or really slow, right? I can play along with the rhythm. I can play along with the timing of the notes. Next thing I can do is play along with the order of the notes. What if I did this? Now I'm adding rhythm with the order of the notes. Or now it's totally different, right? I'm only playing 3 notes. So I'm transforming what we previously had was a scale pattern. Now I'm starting to transform it into music layer by layer. Okay? So first we had gear number 1 is, or step number 1 is actually learn the pattern with your fingers. After you learn the pattern with your fingers, now you can shift your attention, shift gears, go to gear number 2, shift your attention to listening to the notes. Now I'm listening to what sound sounds like. Okay? When you listen, when you really get good at listening, Eric Clapton said one time in an interview that he went away for a year and he just practiced and practiced and practiced. And he got really, really good. And he started coming out with some great songs. And the interviewer said, you know, what was it that made all the difference? And he said, I started listening to what I was playing. So gear number 2, you start listening to the sound of what you're doing. When you do that, that's going to tell you what you need to change in your playing. Why? Because you know you already have some music that you want to express. You already have something that you want to play. There's some way that you personally want to hear these specific notes that you're playing in the scale pattern. Again, everybody has music inside them. You have your own version, right? When you start listening, you're going to hear the difference between what you're playing and what you want to feel. What you're playing and what you want to be playing, right? So that's gear number 2. So is listen. Gear number 3 is add some different rhythm to it. So maybe it's something like that. I change the notes around, but if I'm playing the notes in order, I'm just changing the rhythm. The 4th gear would be changing the order of the notes, or something like that. And then finally, the 5th gear is what most people generally refer to as phrasing, or in other words, how do you approach playing each one of these notes? So while I could just do this, I can also do this. I can slide or bend or whatever you want to do, hammer on, pull off, etc. Maybe I do this. Or now it sounds different. I'm just playing these same notes. Or I go, there you go. What if I do this? Now it's totally different. That even sounds kind of silly, right? So you start to play around with this phrasing techniques, and I explain all the techniques. I know we don't have time here, but I explain all the techniques in a course called Irresistible Phrasing 101, where you'll start to be able to use those phrasing techniques. In fact, we have a different course for each one of those gears that I was just talking about. But I'll cover that in just a second. The main point is when you add all of those 5 layers together, you start to get what we call music. You add together, you start listening to what you're playing. First of all, you learn the scale, you start listening to what you're playing, your ear, right? Then you add some rhythm to it, then you change the order of the notes, and then you start adding some phrasing techniques on top of that. When you do all those things and you practice it, you're going to start playing music. So instead of playing, I might play something like this. Whoops. Something like that. Or who knows? It doesn't matter what it sounds like. My point is I'm just showing you how to add all of those together. And when you do that and you really listen to what you're playing, your hands are going to get used to doing all 5 of those different gears, or doing the phrasing, doing the rhythm, etc. But the whole point and the essence and the key to all of this is to listen to what you're doing and listen to or feel what it is that you want to be hearing. What is the music that you want to hear? Or what's the music that you already hear in your head? Try to match that on your guitar, and that's when you're really just letting the music flow.